Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and I have on with me as a guest my old friend, Tim Banting. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you, David. Beautiful sunny day here in the UK, which is pretty rare, as well, you may know.
Well, where we are here in the U.S., spring is trying desperately to break out. The thermometer is not really being very agreeable about it. So we're getting these 30, 40 degree temperature swings in Fahrenheit and cold day, hot day, and that's how people get sick.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can never decide in spring what jacket to wear. Would you wear one with a hood? Do you wear one that's waterproof? Do you have a light one, a heavy one? It's a quandary, isn't it?
And
Bit
for
like
us
our,
analysts, it's whichever swag jacket we should be wearing. Should I wear the
well,
Microsoft jacket
exactly.
or the Neat jacket or the yeah? So we got to work that out. So for years, Tim was one of the senior analysts at Omdia, and now, as I understand it, you've just started your own organization. Tell us about that. How it started, what it's named, what you're doing.
Certainly, Dave. Thank you very much. Yes. So what now what? That's the name of the company. So we look at the what, the news, the so what the implications are, and the now what is the recommendations really for both buyers and vendors. And it really came from, well, I must have spent at least 20 years in the trenches of unified communications and customer experience in product management, sales engineering, competitive intelligence, and analyst roles. And I've seen both markets from many different perspectives. I think for me, there was one aha moment that really changed things up. And I remember one client at Enterprise Connect, they said, Tim, we spent hours briefing you on roadmaps and strategies, and in return, we get very little actionable feedback. And then when you do publish a report, it says the same thing to us as it does to our competitors. And that really hit me. I realized I realized that the traditional analyst model was broken. It leads to this sort of almost like a sea of sameness. Vendors all speaking the same language because they're all reading the same reports, which leads to all this me too undifferentiated messaging. And I know as analysts, we've oftentimes sat in Enterprise Connect and said, you know what, you could substitute the logos of all of these vendors at the keynote and you wouldn't know which one's which. And I feel that if your messaging sounds the same as everyone else, you just fade into the background and it just becomes noise. So a generic report won't tell you why a market shift is happening or what buyers are really looking for or how a competitor's move might matter specifically to you. And that's why I started the company as a sort of antidote to generic advice and intelligence.
Yeah, I support that and I believe that, for in a lot of ways you can talk about how I'm the senior most analyst out there in the industry. And in a lot of ways you can talk about how I'm the junior most analyst in the industry. I've only been doing this for a living for a couple of years now, although I have been writing and reporting on it. What scares and surprises me is just how much we become influencers and not analysts. The It's difficult for me to find one of my colleagues to genuinely say something bad about a company. And we're eating the same food and drinking the same champagne and smelling the same things being cooked in the kitchen. And I know that there are dogs out there. There are problems with some of this stuff, and nobody's talking about it. And I've spent, like a 40-year career saying, you know what? This is my experience of this. This doesn't work. This isn't, you're off the mark. You're missing. And I'm just so stunned that so many of our colleagues right now are like, the little Lego men, everything is awesome, singing around all the time. This one was from the Arcadian days, but I think there's a real gap of honesty in our space right now. And it's something that I wish more of the analysts would agree to.
Absolutely. We need honesty, we need trust, we need integrity. That builds confidence in your strategy. And as I've said, a friend will tell a friend that they got spinach between their teeth. They'll do it discreetly. They're not going to shout it out in the middle of a restaurant. But we need to up our game. We need to show vendors where they're exposed, where they've got same messaging, what they need to do. It's no good just coming out with the same generic fluff because that's not really actionable. And you end up with a lot of people walking on stages at trade shows saying, this is absolutely incredible. It's one of its kind. And then the next keynote, someone wheels in exactly the same thing with exactly the same features.
Yeah, and a lot of the decisions are being made by terrific companies. It's a very very chock full space right now, and I'm sure there's going to be some consolidation somewhere along the line. But so I don't hold any of them. I'm not angry with any of them, but it's very difficult to get the differentiation that one would be expecting, especially because they make these decisions inside an echo chamber. And one great example is a large platform to be remain nameless. Just had one of their big events in our industry right now, and pretty much announced that they were out of the business that they used to be in. And no one at the event, to my knowledge, I wasn't there. No one at the event said, "Excuse me, maybe not. Maybe you've got some existing customers that might be upset by this. Here's another way of looking at it." I don't think we really are doing a great job saying, here's the way this might go down, and maybe you might want to rethink this a little bit. And that's, I think, advice that a lot of the companies in our space could really use.
Absolutely. The other area, that's a very key part, David, I think. The other area as well is I've been to these events and I've said, have you ever thought about doing XYZ or XYZ? And one vendor, again, that will remain nameless, said, well, that's not what our customers are asking for. And I've said, well, what about your non-customers? What about your prospects? Your customers will say, will want whatever you're offering them because they're your customers. What about all your competitors' prospects? And, what about what's going on there? So also understanding what buyers are looking for. And when you look at the buying perspective, there's very few analyst firms that really look at the good old PESTLE framework from Marketing 101, what's going on in the political, the economic, the technical, the legal, the social landscape. And things like, for example, in the legal landscape, the EU AI Act is at loggerheads with the US Cloud Act. So we're seeing some really interesting developments where US vendors are going out there and saying, look, you can use this for grading agents and for sentiment analysis. Well, that would flag as a very high risk in the up against the EU AI Act. And in August this year, there's going to be some huge fines if you haven't got a human in the loop and you can sort of justify how AI in a high risk model has come to those sort of conclusions. So there's a whole lot of things that are going on. And at the moment, mainstream analysts just seem to be going with the flow. They seem to be nodding their heads wisely and sagely when they go to these vendor events, and unfortunately not giving any feedback which is actionable, and maybe even giving that contrarian viewpoint that people need to hear.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's one of our biggest responsibilities at these events. Even if it's wrong, even if it's in the minority, you want to flag a company saying, have you considered the downsides of what's going to happen here? And maybe the answer they come back with is yes, we have. But I do think that that's one of the key responsibilities that we have to have going through as an organization. So is that the kind of thing that you're going to be offering to some of your clients?
It is indeed. So what I'm offering is sort of competitive intelligence and market intelligence as a service, looking at what buyers are asking for, using publicly available signals, looking at their narrative strength, the vendor's narrative strength in the industry, what the share of voice is. So all of that will come together, I'm hoping, to give vendors clear guidance as how to get their right messaging out there that's differentiated.
No, that's terrific. And we also have some as you point out, some very interesting roadblocks potentially coming up over the course of the next year. You mentioned one of them around how AI is being handled a little bit differently. You also have the issue that, for whatever the geopolitical reasons that are way beyond the purview of us to talk about, you've got this whole idea of sovereign communication where a number of countries are now saying, I'm not going to be using this publicly available service. I'm going to be using one where the data is kept in within my borders, and that could blow the lid on interoperability again and make it very
Yeah,
complicated.
absolutely. And we've seen that with France and public sector accounts there that have ousted US vendors like Zoom and Microsoft Teams in favor for their own homegrown solution called Visio, which I think of as a Microsoft drawing product, but the French public sector look at it as a unified communications platform.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that I understand how the naming and copyright issues will work around that, because that got me a little bit confused. But yes, I think that's just one of many organizations, governments that are going to want to say that we want to keep the data within our country because we can't trust an outside global company. And I think that'll have a tremendous effect on how we do interoperable communications again. I mean, from PC to PC, probably not that much. It'll just be another link and another, web application. But to rooms, which is where a lot of the business takes place, I think we're going to have another problem on the horizon.
Absolutely. And I think in highly regulated industries like healthcare and finance, you'll still see a lot of those legacy on-premises PBXs still getting mileage in them. There'll be a number of those still deployed, still maintained, and the likes of Mitel and Avaya still maintaining those purely for those reasons.
Hmm. So do we have a new logo? Do we have a new website? Do we have any new information that
We
you
do
can share yet?
indeed. Yep, yep. My favorite colors, purples, is a color that focuses quite clearly on my website, which is www.sowhatnowwhat.co.uk. And if people want to get in contact with me, it's tbanting@sowhatnowwhat.co.uk. It's all singing, all dancing at the moment. Yep.
Terrific. So what are the things that you're looking forward to over the course of the next, quarter or 2 quarters, where you're thinking about, things that might change in the industry? What's on your horizon?
Well, I think for me, it's the categorization and the strategic clusters of unified communications, contact center, customer experience, and CPaaS. Those traditional boundaries and of markets have completely blurred. We've seen UC and UC and CCaaS coming together, unified communications and contact center coming together in this multicast platform. We're obviously seeing agentic AI, which is everywhere. We're seeing the need for more customer data platforms and using that to make an informed data-driven decision on for agentic to work on it. There's a very big blurring of the lines between CRM and what will happen if Salesforce have a headless CRM and use agentic. Do we actually need any CRM front ends? How does CPaaS players like Infobip or Vonage or Bandwidth play in this space? There's a lot of change. A lot of people are looking at the market very differently, and even things like the demise of per seat pricing is going away as we start looking at pricing for AI, and AI essentially becoming a digital workforce in its entirety.
Okay. So a lot of exciting things coming up. Where can somebody see you next? Are you going to be going to any of the big events?
I haven't got any plans yet. I think there's a Microsoft event that's coming up in the UK. I'm going to Infobip's analyst event. I'm keeping the rest of my calendar open. So if there are any events, I look forward to attending them.
Well, Tim, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. It's always a pleasure getting you on in terms of providing opinions, and your view of the industry is sometimes contrarian and sometimes along with everybody else, but it's always very specific and succinct and educational. So I do appreciate your input. We'll have you on the show again, and hopefully we wish you much success in this new endeavor.
Likewise, David, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Give us the website one more time.
Yep, is www.sowhatnowwhat.co.uk.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Tim. And thank you very much for watching this as you do every week. We really do appreciate it. We will see you next week. Take care.